I used to believe marriage meant safety, a soft place to land after long days, a home that sheltered me from storms outside. What I never imagined was that the storm would live inside the very house I built, disguised in the form of my mother-in-law. From the first day I entered that family, she made it clear that I was nothing more than an intruder. My wedding jewelry wasn't good enough. My cooking was bland. My clothes too simple. Even the way I spoke to my husband, too casual, too bold, too unworthy. At first, I brushed it off as insecurity. Older women sometimes struggle to let go of their sons, I told myself. But months turned into years, and every single day became a battleground. I woke up early to cook breakfast. She would hover behind me, muttering about how real wives didn't burn toast. I folded laundry. She would unfold it, shake her head, and redo it in front of me. I bought groceries. She would inspect every label, every price, then lecture me on wasting money. And my husband, he sat there, sometimes silent, sometimes nodding along, rarely ever defending me. I thought love would make him see my pain, but his silence became its own betrayal. Each night, when I lay in bed beside him, the pillow beneath my cheek grew heavy with tears he never noticed. The cruelty wasn't loud. It wasn't screaming or throwing plates. It was smaller, sharper, like paper cuts across my spirit. She would criticize me in front of relatives, call me lazy when guests visited, or complain that her son looked thinner since marrying me. Every insult was disguised as concern, every jab sharpened by a smile. I convinced myself to endure it, for love, for peace, for the illusion of a family. But the body knows what the heart denies. I grew anxious, withdrawn. Meals turned bitter in my mouth. My reflection looked older, hollowed out, tired. Then came the day everything changed. It was an ordinary evening, ordinary in the sense that I was again humiliated for serving dinner too late. My mother-in-law sat at the head of the table like a queen, dissecting every bite I placed before her. My husband scrolled on his phone, pretending not to notice. The children, silent, pushed food around their plates. But that night, as I lifted a spoonful of stew to my lips, something about the taste made my stomach twist. It wasn't spice. It wasn't salt. It was strange, almost metallic, with a sour undertone that clung to the roof of my mouth. I froze. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. I set the spoon down slowly, my heart hammering. Everyone else seemed unfazed. My husband ate mechanically. My mother-in-law watched me closely, too closely. Her lips curved in the faintest smirk. And in that smirk, I recognized something terrifying, deliberate cruelty. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the house went quiet, I returned to the kitchen. I opened the pot of leftover stew, bent down, and inhaled. That smell again. Foul, bitter, not meant for humans. I searched the cabinets, the trash, the pantry, and that's when I saw it, tucked behind a bag of flour, a torn, half-empty sack of dog food. For a long moment I just stared at that sack, my hands trembling so violently that the flour beside it dusted into the air like smoke. The label screamed back at me. Grainy pellets, enriched with supplements for healthy coats and shiny teeth. Dog food. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, that maybe a neighbor's bag had slipped into our pantry by mistake. But deep down, my gut already knew the truth. My mother-in-law's cruelty had crossed from words into something physical, something dangerous. I scooped a handful from the bag, the coarse, pungent scent making bile rise in my throat. Then I pulled out the ladle still resting in the pot. The textures matched. The smell matched. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the counter to keep from collapsing. She had been feeding me dog food. The thought made my skin crawl, my chest seize. Every insult, every smirk, every moment she'd stood over me as I cooked, it all reassembled into one horrifying picture. She hadn't just wanted to break my spirit. She wanted to degrade me, to remind me that in her eyes, I wasn't worthy of human respect. My first instinct was to wake my husband, to shake him until he looked me in the eye and finally chose a side. But then another image surfaced. His blank stare at dinner, his silence as she spat venom day after day. What if he knew? That question clamped around my ribs like a vice. I packed the evidence, the bag, a sample from the stew, into a plastic container and shoved it deep into the back of the fridge. My body was trembling, but my mind had never been clearer. This wasn't something I could scream about over the breakfast table. This wasn't an argument to lose in front of her satisfied smile. This was war, and if I was going to fight, I needed strategy. The next morning, I said nothing. I brewed tea, packed lunches, folded laundry. My mother-in-law hovered as usual, correcting, sneering, nitpicking. But I didn't flinch. Inside, I was building an armor she couldn't see. Over the following days, I began to watch more closely. I noticed how she lingered in the kitchen when I stepped out, how her hands dipped into pots when she thought no one was looking. I noticed how my husband avoided eye contact, how he excused her behavior as just her way. One night, when the house was asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the container of evidence. I held it in my hands and thought about my children, their small voices, their innocent eyes. If she could do this to me, what might she do to them? That was the moment the fear hardened into resolve. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg my husband to defend me. I would not stoop to her games of humiliation. If she wanted to treat me like I was beneath her, I would rise so high she couldn't reach me. And when I struck back, it would be in a way she never saw coming. The plan began quietly, almost invisibly. I stopped reacting to her barbs. When she criticized my cooking, I smiled faintly and nodded. When she commented on my clothes, I adjusted my sleeve with calm precision. The silence unsettled her. For years, my pain had been her fuel. Without my reaction, she stumbled, searching for new ways to provoke me. But beneath that silence, I was gathering proof. I placed a small camera high on the pantry shelf, tucked between jars where no one ever looked. Another sat discreetly in the corner of the kitchen, masked by a potted plant. Every evening, after everyone was asleep, I reviewed the footage. And there it was, grainy clips of her sneaking into the pantry, pulling out that sack of dog food, sprinkling it into the stew with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. My stomach twisted, but my resolve only sharpened. I clipped each video, cataloged each act, and saved them on a hidden drive. Meanwhile, I studied my husband. I watched the way he avoided conflict, how he crumbled under his mother's gaze. He wasn't a cruel man, he was a coward. And cowardice, I realized, was almost as dangerous as cruelty. If I confronted him with nothing but my words, he would retreat to the safest side, hers. But if I confronted him with undeniable proof, he would have nowhere to run. The opportunity arrived on a quiet Sunday evening. We sat at the table, my husband, his mother, and I. The stew bubbled on the stove, filling the room with a rich aroma I now recognized all too well. As I ladled the meal into bowls, I kept my voice steady. "You know," I said, my gaze fixed on my mother-in-law, "it's strange. I've been feeling different lately after dinner. Almost as though I'm eating something not meant for me." Her spoon froze midair. A flicker of panic darted across her eyes before she masked it with a laugh. "Don't be dramatic. Maybe you're just not used to real cooking." My husband shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing the conversation would drift elsewhere. That was when I pulled the drive from my pocket and slid it across the table. "Maybe you should both watch this before you eat." The silence that followed was suffocating. My husband's brow furrowed as he plugged the drive into his laptop. My mother-in-law's smile faltered as the first video played. Her shadowy figure, sprinkling dog food into the pot with deliberate malice. Clip after clip played, each one more damning than the last. By the end, the only sound was the bubbling stew on the stove. My husband's face drained of color. "Mom, is this true?" His voice trembled, a mix of disbelief and disgust. She sputtered, tried to deny it, then launched into excuses. That it was a joke, that I was overreacting, that the footage was misleading. But the evidence was clear, undeniable. And in that moment, for the first time, my husband looked at me. Not with indifference, not with avoidance, but with shame. He had let his silence enable this. I leaned back in my chair, calm and steady. "So," I said softly, "tell me again how this is just her way." The room erupted. My husband's voice rose, stammering accusations and disbelief. His mother, cornered like a snake, hissed venom at both of us. "How dare you spy on me?" she snapped, her eyes blazing with fury. "After everything I've done for this family, this is the thanks I get?" I didn't flinch. "Everything you've done," I replied evenly, "wasn't for this family. It was for control. And you've finally lost it." For years, she had thrived on secrecy, her cruelty tucked neatly into the shadows. But with the truth exposed in the cold light of evidence, her power crumbled. She tried to laugh it off, tried to twist the narrative into one where I was the villain. But no words could erase the images that replayed on the screen. My husband buried his face in his hands. I can't believe this." "Oh, believe it," I said, my tone sharper now. "Because while you sat silent, she made sure I swallowed her hatred with every bite. And you let it happen." That last sentence hit him harder than the footage itself. His silence had always been his shield, but now it became his guilt. He looked between us, torn, but the tide had turned. For the first time, he didn't immediately rush to defend her. She saw it too. The grip she'd held on him for years was slipping through her fingers. Desperation flooded her expression. "She's lying, manipulating you. I did it because she doesn't respect me." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Respect is earned, and what you've earned is shame." The words hung in the air like a verdict. That night, my husband didn't speak to me. He didn't speak to her either. He simply sat in silence, haunted by the evidence and the realization of his own failure. His mother stormed to her room, slamming the door behind her, but even that sound carried less authority than before. Over the next days, the house shifted. My husband avoided her glares, too weighed down by the truth he couldn't deny. She, once so loud and commanding, grew quieter, her presence shrinking with each passing moment. But silence was not enough for me. For years, I had endured torment under her roof. I didn't just want her to stop. I wanted her to be held accountable. So I took the footage and I made copies. One went to my lawyer, another to a trusted friend outside the family. I wasn't naive. I knew she would try to twist the story, to paint herself as the victim if word spread. But I was prepared. When I finally confronted her again, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply set the envelope of documents on the table, the legal notice, the evidence, the steps I was prepared to take if she dared to retaliate. Her face drained of color. For the first time since I had known her, she was truly speechless. "You wanted to poison me?" I said softly. "But the truth is, you poisoned this family long before I ever came here. And now it ends." She tried to laugh, but the sound cracked in her throat. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, clutching the table's edge as if it could keep her from collapsing under the weight of her own fear. But I did dare. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as a powerful matriarch towering over me, but as a frightened woman whose empire of cruelty was crumbling. My husband sat nearby, his face pale. His silence now wasn't complicity, it was shame. He glanced at the envelope, then at me, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. He looked smaller somehow, as though the illusion of his mother's authority had always been his armor, and without it, he was exposed. I held my ground. "This isn't just about what you did to me. It's about what you taught him to accept. About what you made him believe was normal." She tried to snarl something in return, but I didn't give her the chance. "You thought humiliation was your weapon, but it's mine now. You fed me scraps of pain, hidden in meals I trusted. You planted bitterness in every corner of this house, and you smiled while I choked on it. But today, I serve the last course, and it's justice." Her hands trembled. "If you go through with this, you'll destroy this family." I met her eyes, steady as stone. "You destroyed it long ago. I'm just cleaning the ashes." There was no shouting match after that. No dramatic fall to her knees begging forgiveness. Just a stunned, hollow silence that said everything. She knew she had lost. The following week, my husband begged me to reconsider. He wanted to keep things private, to shield the family name from disgrace. But his pleas came too late. I had lived too long with his silence, too long with his excuses. So I stood firm. "You had years to speak up," I told him. "Now it's my turn." The day we went to court, her mask finally shattered. No pearl necklace, no carefully pressed attire could hide what the evidence revealed. The footage spoke louder than any words she could muster. And though she tried, oh, she tried, to twist her role into one of sacrifice and suffering, the truth bled through every frame. The judge's words were simple but final. Restraining order granted. Full protection ensured. A public record of her cruelty stamped into history where it belonged. My husband sat beside me, hollow-eyed, his hand twitching as if he wanted to reach for mine. But I didn't offer it. His silence had been its own betrayal, and trust, once shattered, isn't easily rebuilt. When the gavel struck, I felt no triumph, no glee, just release, like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. Walking out of that courtroom, the sunlight felt different, brighter, sharper, alive. I wasn't the broken woman she had tried to shape me into. I was the woman who survived her cruelty and then buried it with truth. Life afterward wasn't suddenly perfect. Scars don't vanish the moment justice is served. They linger, whispering reminders of what was endured. But those whispers no longer controlled me. They were proof of my endurance, proof of my resilience, proof that even in silence, I had been stronger than her noise. Neighbors who once nodded politely now looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with quiet admiration. I didn't need either. What I needed was peace, and for the first time in years, I had it. My husband and I remained under the same roof for a time, like two strangers passing in a hallway built on broken trust. He made efforts, small ones, to bridge the gap. But I had learned something far more valuable than reconciliation. I had learned that love, real love, cannot survive in the shadow of silence. And so I began again, not with revenge carved from bitterness, but with freedom forged from truth. Sometimes I still hear her voice in the back of my mind. Sharp, mocking, cruel. But now, when it echoes, I don't shrink. I smile, because I remember the ending she never saw coming. The woman who tried to poison me with fear was left to choke on her own downfall. And I stepped forward, unbound, into a life where my worth was no longer measured by her approval, but by my own strength. Justice didn't arrive in thunder or flames. It came quietly, steadily, with undeniable weight. Came in the form of truth. And in that truth, I found the sweetest revenge of all: freedom.